Welcome, everyone, to Buddha Center. My name is Jeff Allen, and today we're discussing Lama Tsongkhapa's a great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. So fortunate, many of us, as I've said so many times, have a very close connection with this text because Khyentse Geshe Wandok taught it for so long. I feel like the moment he showed up in Middletown, Connecticut, he started talking about this text that he spent a decade specifically on. And many of us have heard these topics so many times, over and over and over again. And the beauty of these topics is that we can really have a deeper realization into them as we become more and more advanced, and as our analysis becomes clearer and clearer, and as our calming meditation becomes kind of more stable and allows us to hold on to topics for longer periods of time and learn them in a more kind of clear way. So before we get started with the actual instruction, today we're going to do a guided meditation that begins with what we always do, setting a proper motivation, starting with our body posture, and getting into a specific posture that will allow us to have clarity of mind, and then be able to engage in some breathing exercises that will allow our mind to get to a more neutral place, from which we can then have a clear way to listen to the Dharma, to engage in the glancing meditation that we're going to do, to be able to do a little analysis about the topics that we're going to analyze. If we can get our mind to a calm place before we start to do such activities, then we're more likely to be able to focus on them in a correct manner, where we have an abandon of the three faults of the three pots that we've heard about so much. If our mind is very calm and open and a receptacle for information, and then for evolution and for change that should take place from that information, we have to gain the wisdom arisen from hearing and hear things exactly the way that we're supposed to hear them, and then have those topics so clear in our mind that they're clear topics that we can correctly assume because they're correct topics, but then we can analyze them to make sure that we infer them in a really proper way. So we use that conceptual, that reasoning that we have, that intelligence that we have as humans, to be able to take what we hear and hear so purely and then analyze it in a flawless way, so that we can then kind of use that analysis to sharpen our wisdom more and more and more, so the objects of negation that we're trying to get rid of in terms of ignorance of our mind become clearer and clearer and more negatable. But our mind is doing this and doesn't really have the ability to focus so clearly like it needs to do to cut the root of cyclic existence. So we have to be able to have this calm mind that we begin this meditation with every time, the breathing meditation or any kind of meditation which will lead to shamatha, where we try to really focus our mind on one single object. And be able to hold it there without laxity, lethargy, or excitement, or any of the obstacles of meditation that can come in. So we have these two things that we're developing in meditation. One is a very sharp mind through analysis, through glancing meditation, through understanding the divisions and what all the divisions mean, and then a very calming meditation, which leads to shamatha, or leads to calm abiding, that gets our mind calmer and calmer and calmer and calmer, so that we can then eventually, as we get more advanced in the bodhisattva levels, when we become bodhisattvas, because we can take those two things and complement each other. So as we're getting better and better and better at concentrating and being able to hold a single object, our ability to study and our ability to analyze information will be much more efficient, because we'll have trained our mind to look at this information in a more collective, holistic way, without kind of throwing out what we normally would because of some of our, closed-mindedness and our mind's inability to be so focused. So we get our mind more and more focused, and then what happens is we unite these two, this analysis and this calming meditation unite, and the analysis actually churns itself into a pliancy that then attaches to this calm abiding meditation, and allows then for the participant to go deeper and deeper into do the actual investigation of reality and get to the point where the investigator, that wisdom consciousness that's investigating reality, that has as its object of observation emptiness, is able to get closer and closer to that object to the point where the conceptuality in the mind of the observer seems to have vanished, and the actual object, so the subject and the object, become so close together, there's not really a differentiation that can be made from the point of the observer and the observed, which is emptiness. And then eventually, because of that conceptual understanding, and as Geshe Aga told me yesterday, because of the inferences, the more and more inferences you have at more and more subtle levels, you are able to get to the point where this a non-duality of subject and object becomes apparent, and that even though there's still some signs there that are so subtle, you are able to be so close to that object that you're at what's called the last mundane state of cyclic of existence, the last mundane state of existence. And it's from there that you are next going to directly perceive emptiness in a non-conceptual way. But you need both of these things, this calming meditation that we learn about and that we have to get very, very good at. We can never, ever leave this out of our toolbox. I heard the great master Alan Wallace say, if you are not doing shamatha meditation, if you are not learning every day how to train and calm your mind down, you're missing an entire part of the Buddhist path. And if you're not engaging in analytical meditation, you are missing an entire part of the Buddhist path. So we need to have both of these things because they will collide eventually and they will allow you to see emptiness. And then it will be those skills that then allow you to see emptiness over and over and over again as you purify more and more subtle afflictions, and then eventually as a bodhisattva, their stains. So this is the process that we're kind of playing around with right now, and we're playing around with today, so that we can then eventually actually saturate our minds with these ideas that we're talking about through a glancing meditation, through an actual analytical meditation of each and every one of these topics that abandons the ignorance in a complete way through a reliance on a correct sign in relation to each and every one of these topics. And once we do that, we'll then have the next realization, right? So if we have renunciation generated in our mind, we become a fertile field to become bodhisattvas. So we see that we have to have the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, have them realized in our mind, and then we have to have the teachings for beings of great capacity realized in our mind through this process of the wisdom arisen from hearing, the wisdom arisen from analysis, and the wisdom arisen from meditation. So this is how we will eventually become Buddhas. It's by stamping everything out that's not Buddha about us in a very gradual fashion, but we can really, really speed it up if, we can have the ability to stamp out more topics at a time because our mind is so focused and our mind knows what those topics are that need to be abandoned in terms of those topics of ignorance that abide in our mind, whether they're artificial or at the subtler level, the natural abiding kind of conceptions of true existence that we all hold on to. So with that in mind, let's get into a posture that will allow us to be suitable recipients of a teaching, because we will be listening to it in a way where we don't have our ears closed. Like if we wanted a vessel to drink out of, we wouldn't turn it upside down and try and pour water into it. So we shouldn't have our ears closed. We shouldn't be half paying attention, because if we wanted a good vessel to pour water into, we wouldn't want it to have a hole in it if we were really thirsty, because we'd only be half quenched, and then our thirst wouldn't be quenched. We wouldn't be able to achieve the state of Buddhahood if our thirst isn't quenched, if our hearing isn't quenched with the proper hearing in terms of all of the facts. Because we know that partial paths lead to partial results, and there is no partial enlightenment in terms of the two kinds that we talk about. They're fully, you don't have this kind of partial one and then there's some sort of satisfaction. Partial equals cyclic existence in terms of this. So this is why we have to really, really have these clear understandings. So without further ado, again, we're getting into a posture where we can become very clear, where we can make sure that we're going to become bodhisattvas and become Buddhas for the sake of all sentient beings. So we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture we've talked about very, very many times. I know there's a lot of people on different applications that may not have heard of this before. I've done many, many different shorter pieces. And almost every single teaching I begin on YouTube begins with this kind of 7-point Vairocana posture with more of a detailed explanation than I'm going to give today. So we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture where we have our legs preferably in the lotus position or crossed however we can. We have our right hand on top of our left with our thumbs touching, making a diamond. Our back very straight, vertebrae like a stack of coins. This is a very, very important part. No matter what else we do, the back straight is super important. So we keep our back straight. It says vertebrae like a stack of coins with our shoulders in a comfortable position. Comfortable position allowing for our arms to kind of bow out. And we end up in this very, very kind of symmetrical posture that will allow us to engage in meditation for long periods of time once we physically become more and more accustomed to it. So we have our shoulders in a very comfortable position. We have our head slightly tilted forward, our eyes slightly open, pointed at our nose, our mouth in a comfortable position with our tongue against our teeth. So now, in this position called the 7-point Vairocana posture, again, eyes slightly open, not closed, not fully open. Not closed because we have a reference to going to sleep and we have a tendency to become very dull with our eyes closed completely. If our eyes are open completely, we have a tendency to over-conceptualize things around us. So we keep our eyes very, very, very slightly open, and eventually that eye consciousness, that kind of perception will disappear because our meditation is only being done with our mental consciousness. It is our mind that's meditating. What is meditating? My mind is meditating. So we begin to breathe in and out through our nose. Breathing in through our nose, we bring it all the way to the top of the breath. Filling our lungs and our diaphragm, doing this in a very, very natural way, not breathing in too quickly like we were doing a quick inhale, not breathing in so slowly that it becomes a distraction because we almost feel like we're gasping for air. Just breathing in and out in the very normal fashion. Our mind will have a tendency to try to adjust the breathing because now we're thinking about it, but just try to let the mind watch the breath. Merely watching the breath in its natural flow, going in and out, not forcing it in any way, just bringing it all the way to the top of the breath, filling the lungs and filling the diaphragm, and then exhaling. And focusing on the breath, and as you exhale, count the number 1. Breathing in through the nose, filling the lungs and diaphragm all the way in a very natural fashion. It gets to the top of the breath. Exhale, count the number 2. Breathing in through the nose, all the way to the top of the breath, filling the lungs and the diaphragm, exhaling as soon as you get to the top of the breath, counting the number 3. So let's focus on that meditation for a short period of time, trying to get our mind to a more neutral place. The breathing is neutral. We come in here with so many conceptualities. Even before the teaching, we were thinking of so many things we were attached to. Thinking of so many things we disliked, thinking of so many ways that we could make the world better if it only paid attention to the way that we saw it. Let's get rid of all of those ideas and focus only on the breath, bringing our mind to a neutral place that's ready to think of the most wonderful being in the world, Buddha Shakyamuni. Continue to focus on the breath, breathing in and out through your nose, counting as you exhale. And now imagine in the space in front of you, about an arm length away, about 2 feet away, eye height, is the image of Buddha Shakyamuni in his actual form. 3-dimensional, radiant, beautiful, glowing, about the size of your thumb, about 2 inches. Not too big, but not too small. See the beautiful details. Now you're focusing on the breathing in and out, the counting of the breath, and the object of observation of Buddha Shakyamuni. Holding only these 3 things: the breath, the number, and the image of Buddha Shakyamuni. But don't imagine it like a picture image. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni is actually in front of you, only 2 inches tall, at eye height, 2 feet away. And we'll focus on that for a moment. How fortunate we are to be able to focus on such a holy being, to be able to look up to such a holy being that we will become. Our mind will become as pure as the Buddha's mind. The Buddha's mind, before becoming Buddha, was impure like our mind. Our mind has Buddha nature, the seed of the Tathagata, just like the Buddha has the seed of the Tathagata. My mind can mature into the state of Buddha's mind. My mind's nature is the same nature as the Buddha's mind in terms of ultimate reality. My mind dependently originates. The Buddha's mind dependently originates. My mind is not truly established. The Buddha's mind is not truly established. I can mature my mind into a state of perfection. This incredible holy being has the excellent qualities of body, speech, and mind and enlightened activities. I too will have those excellent qualities if I engage in the practices. How lucky we are that we have this human basis that we can mature from, that has this mind that's so intelligent, that can analyze the nature of reality. Be so happy we have this human basis. So what is it that the Buddha brought us? Why did we come to Buddhism? What question did we need answered? What pain did we have that brought us here? It's very, very important to think about this. We think about the first noble truth that the Buddha taught. What was this incredible truth that the Buddha brought to our world? This identification that first proved to us we were in a condition that was out of control. The Buddha stated that this is the superior truth of suffering. We can divide suffering into so many categories, but we have to think personally about each of them. The analytical meditation is analyzing each one of those sufferings and being so convinced that we have it, that our minds never change from the fact of knowing that it is true. So we look at the truth of the fact that we have the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, death. We suffer when we meet with unpleasant things. We suffer from being separated from pleasant things. Think of all of the pleasant things in your life that have been torn away from you in one way or another. Think of all of the unpleasant things you've had to meet with and everything that you wanted you could never get. How that made our minds feel. The suffering of this body and this mind that becomes so tortured and full of depression and anxiety, and this body that has so much experience of pain. As we get older and older and older, we see it becomes more and more difficult physically for us. But we recognize the moment of our birth, we began the process of aging and dying, and we're moving so quickly to all of these things. The Buddha taught that there was this subtle impermanence, that we were moving so quickly, every moment, towards birth, aging, sickness, and death, not getting what we want, etc. More suffering physically and mentally. These aren't deniable things. These are things that cause us so much pain. The uncertainty of cyclic existence, friends turning to enemies, strangers turning to loved ones. And when we look at it in terms of beginningless time, we've had every relationship with every being. And in my future life, who knows what kind of relationship I'll have with you? You who I love so much I may never see again until I'm Buddha. No matter what, wherever I am within cyclic existence, there's no satisfaction, because I won't be able to stay in that state. I'll have everything I want and I'll be so dissatisfied. We know this. We know there's this gnawing dissatisfaction that occurs even when we get the things that we want. We think there might be just a little bit more, something more. I just need more. That's my philosophy, more. And then I have to be reborn, and then born again, shuck these bodies off, this body that I hold so dear, that I have so many feelings about, that I cling to so dearly. I think it's just so important. I dress it up. I make its hair go a certain way. I present it to the world as if it's a masterpiece, yet it will kill me. It won't last. I hide what's in my mind, but I dress myself outwardly up like a masterpiece. And I'll be reborn in the lower realms and in the higher realms. I'll think I'm the goat, and then I'll do a goat life. And then I'll think I'm a human again, and I'll do a human life. And all of these things I will be propelled and thrust into by my ignorance. And who will accompany through all of this process? When I die, my loved ones will be around me, maybe, if I'm lucky and have them. But they won't be able to experience that severing. I will now be the deceased instead of the living. They'll write a time of death down, but I will move on. My consciousness will move on, and no one will be there with me. I will be alone through that journey until I can find more companions that I cling to, and I think are the only companions. The Buddha said that this perpetual cycle of being forced into a set of suffering aggregates over and over and over again because of karma, their seeds and the afflictions, driven by ignorance. Buddha said that's the real superior truth of suffering. This cycle that every single moment we're moving towards these things. And because of our karma and afflictions, these seeds that give rise to these experiences of contamination, it wouldn't stop unless we put a stop to it, is what the Buddha said. We just keep going because its cause would always be there. And if the cause was always there, it would just keep going and keep going and keep going. The pervasive compounded suffering, the real suffering that Buddha taught at the first noble truth, the superior truth of suffering. All compounded phenomena are impermanent. Phenomena arise from causes. So then the Buddha stated that this is the superior truth of origin, and made us see very clearly what the origin of all of our suffering is. That all of the 8 sufferings and 6 sufferings and 3 sufferings and all the divisions of sufferings we can come up with are caused at their root by one thing. And that's the grasping at the I and phenomena as being truly established. And in dependence upon that grasping, I have an inappropriate attention. Then the afflictions arise. Now I'm looking at things very, very unclearly. I'm attached and I'm hatred. I have this ignorance. Now all that I see is through this lens that started from ignorance, turned into an inappropriate attention that turned into attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, etc., and then turned into some sort of action. My body, speech, and mind. My intention turned into a physical and verbal action that was contaminated. All contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering. Contaminated karmas, contaminated action gives rise to suffering. The causes are taught by the Tathagata. What are the causes of suffering? It's the grasping at the I and phenomena is truly established. What is the antidote? It's the wisdom realizing emptiness. Where do we find the final wisdom realizing emptiness? We find it in the second turning of the wheel of the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, where we find not only the profound view of emptiness, which is the antidote to all suffering. We find all of the pathways that will not only alleviate one's suffering forever, but will allow one to achieve the state of complete bliss or Buddhahood. We find explicitly the final view of emptiness taught, which is the antidote, the understanding of that final view of emptiness, that all things are not truly established because they dependently originate. The understanding of this view would cut the root of cyclic existence. And if this view and the understanding of this view is coupled with not only a desire to emerge from cyclic existence that one gets by understanding all of one's own suffering, but combined with the mind that aspires to enlightenment or bodhicitta, it can make you a Buddha. So implicitly within the Heart Sutra we find the 5 paths: path of accumulation, the path of preparation, path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. So we grasp at things as having some sort of objective existence. So in the Heart Sutra, when it says no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, etc., it merely means that none of those things have any kind of objective existence. They merely come into being in a subjective way. They have a subjective existence conventionally. So here we find this truth presented in the Heart Sutra, which is the antidote to the suffering. The Buddha said that suffering can end, and if we want suffering to end, we have to get rid of what gives rise to the suffering. If a result's cause is removed, then the result is necessarily removed. So what is the cause of suffering? It's the ignorance that grasps at the I and phenomena as being truly established. So how does one get rid of it? Which is the third noble truth, the truth of cessation, the reality that it can all go away, it can all be gotten rid of, all of this suffering can end. How do we do this? The Buddha stated in the fourth noble truth, this is the superior truth of path. The path is a wisdom that recognizes the nature of reality, that a superior, that a being who reached the path of seeing understood that superior beings, the Buddha has understood to be what is the nature of reality. So with that, let's begin by reciting the Heart Sutra. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. So this sutra presents the antidote to our grasping at the I and phenomena as being truly established, which is the wisdom realizing emptiness. And this sutra presents the antidote to our self-cherishing attitude and all of the imprints of it. And if we do have wisdom and method and unite them, we can become a Buddha. So let's recite this Heart Sutra. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind conscious dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate, paragate, parasangati, bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita, just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world, with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala jube nejo damba ne nguje duchu ngai dudo jendru babo lama yi bujenzi nezon kandro shola jazelo gasamara jajanara zamara begas. Agasamara jajanara zamara bedi adon gate gate paragate parasangati buddhiso papa gonchu sanchika ideme doji she lobo doji mebo doji shewa doji dragi baji medum beje danji she dinga yezo ngeri ndonja je shewa dan medun be jendan jewa dan domba junjin jong joji taji de janden da de le jo sorry. So now we recognize that we can end our suffering by applying an antidote to the origin of suffering. All of our suffering occurs because we grasp at the I and phenomena as being truly established. We grasp at the eye and the ear and the nose and the tongue, etc. We grasp at ourselves as having some sort of objective existence. We don't recognize that all of these things come into being through the types of dependent origination, such as causes and conditions, or the dependent origination of parts making a whole, or a whole having parts, and the dependent origination of mere designation that comes into being subjectively through the power of my naming it. So we see that there are these types of dependent origination, and all of which are considered dependent origination, and it's this coming into being, this collection, that independence upon this collection that serves as a basis of designation. I then impute a name on it and bring it into being as such. So the Buddha said that if I would be very, very clear on this point through analytical meditation and calming my mind down enough, I could then unite these two skill sets and be able to see emptiness directly and cut the root of cyclic existence by becoming more and more subtly aware of the lack of true existence of all phenomena, and eventually achieve the state of arhatship and an abiding nirvana. But I would have fearlessness at this point, but I wouldn't be of a complete aid to others. I look to the ones around me that I love so much, and I wouldn't be able to be of aid to them. I will have then just taken, everything that is good and brought it just to one place for myself. Um, and yes, I could have fearlessness, but my full potential can't be met. If I don't develop more qualities, the Buddha said, my full potential can't be realized. I could achieve nirvana in an abiding form, in the form of a hero, a solitary realizer, arhat, but I wouldn't, if I didn't generate what was called bodhicitta, be able to achieve that state, the state of a Buddha, the complete state of Buddhahood, which is not only fearlessness, but it's infinite happiness, infinite bliss, because the Buddha seeks to benefit all sentient beings. And has that complete love and compassion that makes him or her have that bliss all the time, because the object of observation of their love is everyone. And when you have a complete pure love for someone, there's so much happiness that occurs. Imagine if every moment you had that occurring for every single being, and that's what the Buddha has. The Buddha has this immense love and compassion, this non-bias for every single sentient being, and has this perfect wisdom, perfect compassion, perfect power, perfect skillful means, and becomes the most reliable guide for every being. So one gets to this point of recognizing that yes, I can achieve the state of an abiding nirvana, but there are all these other beings that then have to suffer and have to endure all of the things that I've just thought about when I thought about that first noble truth. I thought about the truth of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Everyone has to have that same pain that they experience. They have to be torn away from things that they find so pleasant. Everyone has that experience. And now I've found this truth. And how wrong would it be to keep it to myself? And if I only keep it to myself, I have limited realization, a limited liberation, limited in the sense that I'm not omniscient. I merely have removed what are called the afflictive obstructions that keep me bound to cyclic existence, so I never experience cyclic existence again. But I'm not of complete aid and benefit to others because there's still some subtle self-grasping, self-cherishing attitude from the imprints that are left over, still in the mind of an arhat, of a Hinayana arhat. So we recognize that there's more to it. There's more than just renunciation and wisdom. There's more than just renunciation, the three highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. An ethics that has renunciation. When we look at the vows, individual liberation vows, the ethics is that they're renunciation vows, and that's where the ethics start, from a desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. But this, mixed with wisdom, we recognize isn't enough. So we begin to think now, looking back, looking at what the Buddha talked about, we would need to gather within our minds, besides wisdom and besides renunciation, in order to develop into a Buddha. So we start to meditate on the instructions that were given by Lord Buddha. We think about the instructions that were given by Lord Buddha to Lord Maitreya, the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and the instructions that were given from Lord Buddha to Manjushri, called the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. And they were passed down through the extensive deeds and profound view lineage, and now land in our laps so beautifully, land in our laps from Khensur Geshe Wandak and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We're so fortunate to have received teachings on this. Now Geshe Aga giving such clear instructions on Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, and the section on bodhicitta. We're also so fortunate that we can meditate on this. So let's just now meditate on these points just for a moment. So now we've generated this desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. We know that we can emerge. We know that we have to combine this sharp wisdom with this incredible shamatha meditation, this calming meditation, and we have to unite them and let it see reality over and over and over again. But we have to open our hearts bigger. We have to start to think of others, and think of others in the sense of they equally deserve to have this liberation that I speak of, this liberation that I've heard about. Does a bug know about it? How could I become in the most reliable format to help even a bug achieve the state of liberation that everyone can achieve, that state of Buddhahood? We all have Buddha nature. A bug and myself equally have Buddha nature. So we begin to meditate on this beautiful combination of the equalizing and exchanging self with others and the 7-point cause and effect practice that we find so beautifully given to us in the Lam Rim tradition. We start to meditate on, since beginningless time, we've had all kinds of relationships with every single sentient being. This is meditation on equanimity. Start to really watch what your mind does during these points. Allow your mind to really absorb into this meditation. Since beginningless time, I've had relationships with all sentient beings, all varying relationships. Right now, I have specific relationships that I cling to in one way or another. But since beginningless time, I've had every one of these kinds of relationships with everyone. My friends have been my enemies. My enemies have been my lovers. Strangers have been my best friend, and there hasn't been any certainty since beginningless time. Although in this life, because my mind is so small and so closed, I only see what's in front of me during this moment. But we see even in this life that our friends turn to enemies, enemies turn to friends, and strangers become both. So we start to develop this kind of equal idea, starting with neutrals, an equal idea we'd be willing to benefit them equally without having any kind of bias. If someone else walked in, we'd see a stranger and be equally willing to help them. An open mind, almost, you would call it. And then we move to our friends. We started with neutrals because you see, when we move to friends, this grasping takes place that we have to tone down. We have to be equally willing to help a stranger as we are to helping a friend. We no longer would walk over a stranger to get to a friend to help them. We would help both equally. Because our closest loved ones before have been strangers to us. We label everyone with these concrete terms that are so ignorant. They are not concrete terms. They are merely labels based on how we feel at the moment. We think about enemies. Whoa, our mind goes to a very strong place. That's why we do this last. We see our mind doesn't do as much with neutrals or strangers. We become very attached when we think about friends. And then we become a little bit angry, and an uncomfortable moment happens in our mind when we think of enemies. But these labels are all just labels. We label them depending on how we feel and how they interact with us from moment to moment. Tomorrow, any of them could become any one of those things that we label so securely at this moment. So we become to loosen the grip on this friends, enemies, and neutrals and become equally willing to help all of these types of beings. Our mind loosens up around all these types of beings and then tightens it enough to be equally willing to help all of them. We get to the next part where we recognize that every single sentient being, everyone in the universe, has been so kind to us, has taken care of us, has been our mother, has been our father, has been that being that you can think of in your life that you knew took care of you when you were so vulnerable and couldn't take care of yourself. You were helpless. And there was a being there that took care of you and loved you so much and put your needs before their own in some way or another. And we know that every single sentient being has done that for us at one point in time. Since beginningless time, this consciousness has had various forms and various relationships, and we've had every relationship with everyone. Every being has been so kind to us, has been in that position that took care of us when we were vulnerable. All sentient beings have been our mother, have been our father, have been our best friend, etc. And we remember the kindness that they've shown us. We think about all the ways that these beings have been so kind to us. Our parents have been so kind to us. Our closest friends have been so kind to us and took care of us when we were so vulnerable, when we were so sick, or when we were in a position where we couldn't take care of ourselves as a baby. There was someone there who was making sure that we didn't pass away, Someone took care of us when we were so vulnerable, and in every single lifetime they've taken care of us. Someone has taken care of us, and every single sentient being at one point in time has had that relationship with us. But our mind is so small, we've forgotten it. We've forgotten the love that everyone's given us, and now we're willing to give them hate because we're so ignorant. So we think about all the kindness that they've shown us, and we begin to think, oh, how nice, I must repay this kindness that they've shown me. And in the Great Lamrim text, it says, as we realize these things, as we encounter even bugs, we say, oh, you were so kind to me at some point in time. I wish I could do something for you. Every being we encounter, every being in the supermarket we encounter, when this mind comes to full beauty, it says in the text, when we really realize this, we'll see each of them as having taken care of us when we were vulnerable and say, I'm your child. You're my best friend. And we won't see beings in the same way when we cultivate our minds this way. So we come to this place where we say, I want to repay this kindness that you've shown me in all of these lives when I couldn't take care of myself. But I know from meditating on the Four Noble Truths that the happiness of cyclic existence is contaminated and has a self-destruct mechanism in it. It's called the suffering of change. Eventually, all my happiness ends with some sort of separation, unfortunately. It's the nature of the happiness in cyclic existence. It's our current state. So we table that for a moment. We say, I must repay their kindness in a full way. And I know that true happiness is liberation. So then we begin to understand that all beings are equally important. All beings are equally important. You aren't any more or less important than I am. I'm not any more or less important than you are. We are all equally important. We all want happiness. When you feel happiness, you feel happy. When I feel happiness, I feel happy. What's feeling happy? My mind's feeling happy. What's feeling happy for you? Your mind's feeling happy. When I have pain, when I experience pain, when I interpret pain, what's interpreting that pain? My mind's interpreting that pain, and it feels awful. When you have that happen, your mind interprets that pain and it feels awful. You deserve to be free from pain just as much as I deserve to be free from pain. We're equally important in that sense. You deserve to be happy just as much as I deserve to be happy. I can't possibly think, if I put 1,000 people in front of me and look at all of them, that I deserve to be happy more than those 1,000 people deserve to be happy. That I deserve to be free from suffering more than those 1,000 people deserve to be free from suffering. We all equally deserve to be free from suffering, deserve to have happiness. We're all equally important. We all have Buddha nature. We all can become a Buddha in this lifetime. All of our minds are not truly established. I can't even find me without looking at other. In order for me to establish something that is different from you, which is me, I have to see you in order to establish that. In order for there to be far, there has to be a near looking far. But once you get to what was far, and you get closer and closer, it's near. So we see these labels are mere designations. And that I, this I that I cling to and that I cherish, is a mere designation. And this other that I push away and that I put a line between is a mere designation. We start to see this equal importance. Equally, ultimately, the same nature. Different consciousnesses, very important to understand. Not the same consciousness, but our separate consciousness have the same nature. We're all equally important. Our separate consciousness all each have the individual potential. We each individually have the potential to transform our polluted, diluted, current state consciousnesses into the state of a Buddha's consciousness. Why? Because my mind doesn't have inherent existence. My mind can dependently originate into anything that the causes and conditions are there for it to dependently originate into it. And that's how we can become Buddha. That's why the Buddha potential is there. And I have this same exact potential. You have that same exact potential. We're both equally important. Cherishing myself is ugly. I see all the times when I've been so selfish and I've really worked so hard at it the results were usually not the most great. And when I cherished others and when I tried to love the most and tried to be the most considerate, the happiness I felt was much more than all of these plans and schemes I make, because I cherish myself so much. And I get so wrapped up in needing this, becoming attached to this because I cherish myself so much. And I have to go out and get this. And I dislike that and get that out of my face. I hate that so much. I hate you so much because I cherish myself so much. And that feeling that exists between those two places, where one is attached and trying to get something, that feeling, and one is pushing something away because it hates it so much, that feeling that feels so disgusting is from the self-cherishing attitude. We see in our lives cherishing ourselves and thinking only about ourselves and not looking at a bigger picture and discriminating only us, me, this soul discrimination, and then establishing other as so less than is so disgusting. And we see that it's made our minds so unhappy since beginningless time, and all of the evil and suffering in the world has all been caused by the self-cherishing attitude, it says in Shantideva's text. We look at beings who cherish others. We look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We look at times in our own lives when we've cherished others. We look at when someone has a birth of a child, that moment when that love and that immense happiness is there. We see that happiness is from cherishing another being. That being really doesn't have much to offer at that moment, but there's so much love and compassion there, that cherishing attitude just makes that person glow and makes them have an experience they've never had. So we see that cherishing others produces that immense happiness, and that the beings who cherish others are so much worthy of the world's honor. We see beings who cherished others like Jesus in history, and now Dalai Lama, Kensur Geshe Wanda, Geshe Dorje Damdu, Geshe Lobsang Gompa. We see the wonderful works that they can do and what they're able to accomplish because they're able to get themselves out of the way. So we see the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitude and the benefits of cherishing others. And we're meditating on this. So this is the meditation we're doing. Then we start to imagine if we could take on others' suffering. We start to ramp it up. We say, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. We start to think, if this happiness, this bliss happens in my mind in dependence upon other sentient beings, and that my eventual Buddhahood will be in dependence upon other sentient beings and my developing love and compassion for them, we recognize that how wonderful it is, and we begin to wish that we could take on other beings' suffering. We begin actually, because we are a sentient being, we begin with ourselves. We have to make sure we reinforce this idea that we have to be able to develop this idea to want to emerge first and understand our own suffering so purely, to be able to understand others' suffering so purely. So we have to make sure that we're in a really stable place to be able to engage in a meditation, to be able to take on suffering and give happiness. Because we can't take on something if we're not ready to do so. If we aren't full of fearlessness, and that comes from taking away our own suffering in this meditation. And we can't give away happiness we don't have. We can't give away root virtues we don't have. So we have to imagine that we're full of fearlessness and full of root virtues and happiness in order to be able to really think about others in a pure way. Even though we know at the beginning of this meditation it required renunciation, we're just reestablishing that. We're just reaffirming that in our minds. So we imagine that we can imagine in the space in front of us. There's many ways to meditate on this. Don't be stuck on this one way. And we can imagine we're taking on our current sufferings in the form of a black light. And we can imagine that we're then transforming into a less suffering state, and we can imagine then we're giving ourselves happiness in the form of a white light through our right nostril. So left nostril taking on our suffering, and then through our left nostril, imagining that we're giving ourselves happiness. We're taking away all of our fears. We're imagining, and we're taking our fears away now. We're taking away fears that will happen in the future. We're taking away fears that will happen forever. So we imagine this is a very abbreviated form of this, but we imagine we're taking on all of our suffering in the form of a black light, and we're giving all of our we're receiving all forms of happiness and virtue in the form of a white light. So imagine we do this meditation. We can do it in various ways. We can do it like a mirror, but we can do it in various ways. So we imagine now we're fully strong. We're fully full of love, capability, fearlessness, and now we imagine that sentient beings are in front of us, below us, above us. However we want to do this meditation and visualization, we use specific beings. We broaden this meditation more and more and more, and we can imagine them one by one. We can imagine them in groups, but we imagine that we're taking on the suffering of sentient beings in the form of a black light into our left nostril, inhaling it, imagining that black light goes down to our heart area where there's a black dot. And imagine that black light then dissolves into that black dot, and that black dot is our self-cherishing attitude. And imagine that then that black light ray that you've inhaled starts a fire and burns away your self-cherishing attitude, almost like you see like ashes, soot of your self-cherishing attitude. And now you feel very strong to cherish others. And now you imagine it in a form of a white light through your right nostril as you exhale all of your root virtues and happiness. And you can imagine even in the form of bodies go to each and every single sentient being, and your body transforms into a wish-fulfilling jewel that they could wish for anything, and imagine that it then grants that wish. You can imagine that you can do it at mundane levels where you imagine that you're giving, if you were taking on, for instance, all of the suffering of the hell beings, a hungry ghost being, animals, humans, demigods, and gods. You're taking on all of these suffering. When you're giving happiness and your root virtues to these beings, you can imagine in a mundane sense that their troubles are quelled. Beings who are experiencing heat have a pleasant climate suddenly, and then are able to think more clearly. And then you can imagine that you up the ante, and that these lights then transform them into pure beings and take away all of their suffering. Because our goal as a bodhisattva, when we become bodhisattvas, is to lead every single sentient being to a state of Buddhahood. So you can imagine it as if it's a resultant, it's a situation that has happened in your meditation, and it leaves more imprints in your mind to want to help everyone. And that's the whole point of this, is to plant more and more seeds in your mind to want to help everyone, to be willing to go to any length to help anyone, and to help them means to help them to eventually the state of Buddhahood. So when you're engaging in this meditation, you can do it like this. So when you're taking on the suffering, you say, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then as you're giving, and that's meditation on compassion. And as you're giving away your happiness and root virtues to the beings, you may say, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And this is meditation on love. So you imagine that you're taking on the suffering of beings. It's extinguishing your self-cherishing attitude. Now you become whole. Now you cherish others. And now as a result, you're giving to everyone. So you're engaging in this meditation to make your mind more familiarized with love, compassion, and it demolishes the self-cherishing attitude. So we do this meditation. We're glancing through this meditation with a little analysis thrown in. And then we actually decide, because we recognize that the most joy we can find is by cherishing someone else. We decide we will cherish all sentient beings before ourselves, because that's the way to our complete state. That's the way we can not only get rid of the afflictive obstructions that a Hinayana Arhat has done, but we can get rid of the obstructions to omniscience and become a Buddha and have complete bliss and be of most aid to all of those beings that we want to have happiness and the causes of happiness, and to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So now we decide that we will put others' needs before our own, and then begin to remember all the real kindness that everyone's shown us in a much more vast way than we thought about before. We only thought about it before in relation to maybe them helping us when we were most vulnerable. But now we think about that every single thing that we enjoy, everything that we have in our lives, is because of other sentient beings, and because of generations of sentient beings, and because of sentient beings that we can't even count. When we look at the limitless or the infinite numbers of beings that there are, and all of the causes and conditions in terms of sentient beings' participation that had to be there for me to have this room full of stuff, and all of the things that I am able to enjoy, the fact that I have shelter, the fact that I have food and nourishment, is because of the kindness of others, because somebody got up and went to do something out of love and compassion, whether it was, caring for themselves, self-love, or caring for a family. They got up and did something out of love and compassion in some way or another, and then now I'm greatly affected. I'm deeply affected in every way I can imagine because of this kindness that all sentient beings have shown, because of this dependence, this interdependence that I have with everyone. I therefore, I really, really, it resonates how kind everyone is in my mind. And now, because of all this meditation I've done, on myself and my current situation and your current situation, and my wanting to help you so badly become liberated, I say, I must be the one who is a cause for you becoming fully fearless, fully free from suffering, and fully happy. I must do that. I must be the one who makes you have happiness, the causes of happiness, and free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I must be that one. And then we recognize that we're not capable of freeing all sentient beings at this moment. That there's only one being, one type of being, because there's limitless Buddhas, there's many Buddhas, but there's one type of being that can truly help all sentient beings, a truly reliable guide. I'm like a person that has all of my bones broken, lying on the ground next to a person who has all of their bones broken. And if I think, oh, I will be a cause for making this person get up, I'm fooling myself, because neither one of us can get up. I can't help you up. I must be able to stand up. I must be able to have truly effective information to work with through a very, very clear lens to be able to truly, truly help you. Because now I'm stuck in cyclic existence just like you. So I recognize I must become a Buddha in order to fulfill all of my needs, which are getting rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. This will make me have fearlessness and complete bliss, will make me have perfect wisdom, perfect compassion, perfect power, perfect skillful means. But it will, because I have all of these qualities, I'll be able to help everyone in the most beautiful way. And because that's all I do, I will perpetuate that bliss in my mind. So may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we arrive at this beautiful, beautiful motivation to listen to more instruction about karma now we've arrived at in the Lam Rim. So may I become Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Have this be a state of mind that is the main mind, that stays there forever. And that's what bodhicitta is. From this meditation that we just did, we will eventually, by doing it over and over again, have our mind turned into one of a bodhisattva. We will never, ever, ever think of anything else but becoming a Buddha for others' sake. We will always have that love and that compassion in our minds, and we'll go to any length for others, and it will never hurt. It will only be full joy. If we have to do something that would normally seem so extreme, we would joyfully do it for another person because of this immense love and compassion that we have in our heart. So what a treasure that we have the mind right now that can find, right? That can harvest. So may we harvest this mind. So from here, let's imagine in the space in front of us, all of the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas. Let's imagine that image of Buddha Shakyamuni that we were just imagining about 40 minutes, maybe an hour ago. Who knows? We imagine that image of Buddha Shakyamuni, the one above me, explodes into the entire merit field in the space in front of you. Imagine Kensei Geshe Wandak, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Dorje Damdu, Geshe Aga, Geshe Tenzin Ladrin La, all these holy beings, Milarepa. Imagining any being that you imagine and you think of as a holy being, a being who has the answer to get you out of suffering forever. Imagine all of those holy beings in the space in front of you. Imagine the extensive deeds lineage that we just talked about in the 7-point cause and effect instruction for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. We imagine from Buddha Shakyamuni that extensive deeds lineage that goes to Maitreya, and imagining Asanga, and imagining Vasubandhu, and Dharmakirti, and Dignaga, and Gunaprabha, and all of these holy beings in this lineage, imagining them, as many as you can. And imagining the profound view lineage with Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Buddhapalita, Shantideva, Chandrashita, Baba Vega, imagining all of these beings in the space in front of you, imagining the lineage of blessings, the tantric lineage, so profound, where we find from Tilo and Naropa. So we have this fully integrated path of that was taught by all of these beings in front of us. We find the vast teachings in the extensive deeds path. We find the profound teachings in the profound view lineage. We find the secret Vajrayana teachings in the lineage of blessings, and we're so happy to be able to see all of these holy beings in the space in front of us, all of the gurus and lamas in the space in front of us, all the deities, the highest Yoga Tantra, Performance Tantra, and Action Tantra, imagining all of these deities and the 35 Buddhas and all the protectors. However you imagine the merit field, imagining all those great beings are in the space in front of you and are so happy that you are here listening to ways to meditate and ways to think about the Four Noble Truths and bodhicitta. All of these keys that unlock the door of cyclic existence, unlock the door that opens up into bliss and omniscience. We're hearing about all of these things, and all the gurus and Buddhas and bodhisattvas are so happy that we are doing this. Now imagine that you have brought all sentient beings here. Imagine that you emanate, if you want, infinite numbers of hands, and you bring all the hell beings, all the hungry ghost beings, all the animal beings, all the human beings, all the demigods and gods. Imagine that you've brought them all here and to lead them in prayers, to lead them to a place where they can hear an instruction about the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment by the great master Lama Tsongkhapa. So imagine now all of these beings are so happy because all sentient beings are here. So now the sentient beings are so happy because they've assembled in a place that they know that they can have fearlessness and infinite happiness. And now all the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas filled with bliss because their only goal, because of their immense love and compassion, they love you so much. They put your needs before their own on a bodhisattva path. And as Buddhas, they have this imprint of this thing to put their needs, your needs before their own, that makes them love you so much and only want you to have fearlessness and infinite happiness. And now they see us all at once. Everyone that doesn't have that is here learning how to have that. And that's the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas' only goal. So an immense amount of bliss, imagine, goes over all of these holy beings that love you so much. And imagine that they now start to kind of brew with white, red, and blue light rays and nectars. It starts to kind of brew, and you see the merit field in the space in front of you start to shake. Imagine now that you and all sentient beings have a white Om on your crown signifying your body, a red Ah at your throat signifying your speech, a blue Hum at your heart signifying your mind. Now imagine that From the bliss of the gurus, buddhas, and bodhisattvas, white light rays and nectars now start to turn into rain or snow, falling down on yourself and all sentient beings and transforming into white oms, and then dissolving into the om at your crown and transforming yours and all sentient beings' body into a pure body. Now imagine that from the bliss of the gurus, buddhas, and bodhisattvas, red light rays and nectars shower down on us and all sentient beings. And these red light rays and nectars transform into red Oz, dissolve into ours and all sentient beings' throats, and purify ours and all sentient beings' speech. Now imagine that blue light rays and nectars come out of the merit field from the bliss of our gurus, buddhas, and bodhisattvas, and then transform into blue hum syllables showering down, snowing down on us and all sentient beings, and dissolving into our hearts and all sentient beings' hearts, and purifying our minds. Now imagine with an immense amount of love and compassion for all sentient beings, recognizing that you having the compassion is empty of true existence. The compassion is empty of true existence. The sentient beings are empty of true existence. Sit in that place where you will be, the place of purity as a Buddha, for a moment, with immense love and compassion for all sentient beings. Imagine that your body, speech, and mind have been transformed into the pure body, speech, and mind of a Buddha, just for a moment, what that would feel like. We all have Buddha nature. What would that feel like if you loved all sentient beings without bias? Sit with that. There is no objectively existent I or other. Now make a mandala offering as a request for teaching. Mandala offering is offering a perfect universe to all the teacher and the holy beings all the way back to the lineage to Buddha Shakyamuni that have made this teaching possible. So offering a perfect universe to everyone. So beautiful. And imagining that all beings are abiding in that perfect universe that you're offering. Because the gurus, buddhas, and bodhisattvas, the greatest offering is the offering of practice. Completed practice would make them so happy, no? The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanje ja danza ji janan la, janju badu dani jazuji, dagi juje ji bezonanji, drola benje zanje rubarjo. Sanje ja danza ji janan la, janju badu dani jazuji, dagi juje ji bezonanji, drola benje zanje rubarjo. Sanje ja danza ji janan la, janju badu dani jazuji, dagi juje ji bezonanji, drola benje zanje drubarjo. The one who is transformed into a reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher Sugata, to you, protector, to you I make prostrations. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you do not have renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, you don't have bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you don't have the view. May this teaching be heard and understood in the language of all sentient beings. Okay, everybody. So the pre-teaching before the teaching, the hour and 15-minute setting our motivation for the teaching. But really, when we look at what the introductory prayers are for. They're for setting the motivation, setting the proper foundation for the teaching. When Pabonka Rinpoche was asked if he could kind of shorten up some of this introductory stuff, he was doing all of these prayers and, reciting this and reciting that. And Pabonka Rinpoche responded by saying, well, I would, but it would ruin the whole teaching, so I don't think we should. So we needn't worry about what's first, what's last. This is about subduing our mind. This is about changing our mind. When we look at that short stanza that the Buddha stated, abandon all non-virtue, engage in perfect virtue, subdue your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So we're learning how to develop renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. And we're going through all of the components that will... Let me take a drink. Probably a good idea. So we're going through all of the components that will allow us to achieve that mind in a very, very clear way, a very systematic way. If we try to go about changing our mind into that of a Buddha, but going over here and then going over there, we know if we don't have the directions to get to a final destination, but we kind of know how. If there's parts that we don't know, and we just guess, we're probably not going to end up there. The old story of Rinpoche getting in the car with someone who was sure they knew how to get somewhere, didn't want to rely on any directions, was actually asked if they needed directions before they went. And they had to get to New York City and ended up, as they were going over the, George Washington Bridge, that they maybe had missed something in terms of all of the instructions that were necessary and directions necessary to get to New York City. So now anyone who knows what I'm talking about knows they're in New Jersey, probably. Now there's a big, system of roadetry that's going to be necessary now to get back down to, the West Side, probably Village or somewhere they were going to a Buddhist center to give a teaching. And they finally got there, but I think it took them they went really early to be able to eat and do fancy things in New York before the teaching. And I think they got there and literally Rinpoche had to just go in, and sit down on his throne to give the teaching. And this was all because there wasn't proper preparation. There was something missing. The person driving the car didn't have all of the exact facts. So therefore, the outcome of, hey, let's have a nice time in New York and let's get some dinner and then let's go to the teaching did not occur. Teaching occurred, partial result occurred, but that was the main point. But in this case, if we look at what the parties, Rinpoche and the driver, were seeking to achieve, that didn't happen. And it was because of not knowing all of the instructions. So Lama Tsongkhapa is so kind to us, right? We looked at last week, we went back and looked at the greatness of the teacher teaching and how to listen to and explain the teachings. Those first three categories of the outline, when we look at the outline of the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment. And when we look at them, we see how we use these beings as guides to what we have to do in order to have realizations. We don't see them doing nothing to achieve realizations. We see them going through extreme measures, these great holy beings in these liberation life stories that we read. We see them going to great lengths to establish the Dharma in their mind, to study the Dharma, to then analyze the heck out of the Dharma, and then think maybe they got to a realization and find out they were still nihilists, hadn't understood emptiness at all. Lama Tsongkhapa was, engaging with Manjushri, and a little prideful, and said, in a vision, what view you think I'm holding? Is it the, high view of this or the high view of that? And Manjushri said, no view. You haven't gotten to any of those higher views yet. So we have to keep seeking more and more frames of reference to our mind and truth, because we're able to kind of bend even things that are correct in terms of meaning into something else, because we've been ignorant since beginningless time. So we're so fortunate to have these high holy beings, such as Lord Maitreya, who wrote the Abhisamalamkara, who's mentioned as the, kind of an umbrella text over this text, the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, and then Atisha, who wrote The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, who we see when we refer to the greatness of the author with specificity about the specific author, Atisha. But we all know that the authors of the Lamrim Chemo are really the extensive deeds lineage, the profound view lineage, and the lineage of blessings, all put into an integrated path with the, taking the vast teachings that related to grounds and paths and so forth, and showing exactly how that works, but not being limited to some of the views of the mind-only school that are presented in that lineage of extensive deeds, and finding the views of Nagarjuna and the views of emptiness in the vast, profound view lineage. I'm sorry, the profound view lineage. So really, really so fortunate that we have all of these teachings that we can look at, and we can then really sharpen our minds and get to the point where, through critical analysis that's combined with a calm mind, we can see emptiness. We can cut the root of cyclic existence. We can be sure that we understand those three baskets, the Vinaya basket, the Sutra basket, and the wisdom basket. We have to make sure we have clarity around all of those things. We have to have a kind of a stainless ethics. And we have to have a stainless concentration. We have to have stainless wisdom. These all have to be combined if we're going to get anywhere, with the real foundation being an ethical behavior. Because ethical behavior, our mind, when it isn't doing the right thing, sits in a crappy place, to put it bluntly. And when it's in a crappy place, when your mind's kind of full of that, it can't concentrate. It can't focus on a single object. So that's why ethics is the foundation that allows you to concentrate, and then concentration allows you to focus on wisdom very, very clearly. But we need all of those. So now we're at this topic of karma in the Lamrim Chemo. A word we love to use in the West. We have bumper stickers about it. I would say mostly misunderstood when we look at understandings of what karma means. Karma merely means action, Sanskrit word. Activities, action, doing activities is like when you look at what's the definition of action, doing activities. So what are those actions? What are those activities that one can do? They're activities of the body, speech, and mind. In Basu Bandhu's in the Abhidharma Kosha, we see that through this intention of the mind, then the body and the speech follows, right? It's funny, that song, free your mind and the rest will follow. Totally true. 100% accurate. So it's just funny. But when we look at what karma is, and we look at what drives all of our experiences, it's previously accumulated actions or karma of our body, speech, and mind. And we can we're going to get into more details about karma in the coming weeks, and we'll look at the Lamrim Chemo in a little more detail, because this section's so important. But when we first look at the generalities of karma, we can see that it means that if we engage in non-virtuous activities, those things will eventually, in our future, give rise to suffering. And there's, karma that gives, if it's super, super bad, in terms of the object we're doing badness towards, then it could ripen in this life in terms of unhappiness or pain. But generally speaking, the non-virtue we engage in leaves a seed in our mind, and we experience it in the next life or in many, many, many lifetimes later. Because our consciousness is so infinite. Our consciousness is so big and has all of these imprints, all of these seeds within it since beginningless time that are like the ones we're putting in there now. And the experiences that we're having right now are a result of some sort of concordant action that we previously engaged in. So when we experience pain or suffering now, it's because of a previous non-virtue that we engaged in that was concordant with the result that we're experiencing. Now, when we look at moving forward, how our actions are affecting us, if most of them aren't affecting us in this life, they're going to affect us in the future or many lifetimes later, we can see that the experiences that we're having now aren't necessarily coming from this life. They're coming from a previous life, but more likely many, many lifetimes before. And it's said that we have a beginningless consciousness and beginningless lives. So sorting out why we're experiencing what right now at this moment is what's called an extremely hidden phenomena. And the pure details of every single thing that I'm feeling, experiencing, thinking, and that's happening at this moment karmically to me because of what previous action and what circumstance is something that only really an omniscient mind can understand. But we can understand it in terms of concordant results and start to look at it in that way and start to understand karma by means of logic and investigation. Not blind faith. Karma isn't this like thing that we blindly believe in. That's just this universe is coming to get us. We're just the masters of our fate. We're the creators of our interpretive dance of the illusion that we're interpreting. We're the creators of that dance that we're doing called dependent origination, that our karma's flailing us into, that we feel is like us, and so we hold it so it's us and we come up with all these ideas, but it's merely a dependent origination of experience coming from a previous karma that's a concordant karma. Painful experiences I'm having are from non-virtue, and then I have happy experiences also. So virtues that I engage in cause me to have happiness in the future. So when I'm happy now, it means that I previously, because it means you engage in virtue, it causes you happiness in the future. So when I'm now future Jeff, right? Every moment in a few moments, future Jeff will be here. And will experience results of a previous action engaged in, not by Jeff. So when we think of beginningless rebirth, we have to, as soon as we got this moment's consciousness caused by a previous moment's consciousness caused by a previous moment's consciousness, we're going to get to a place with consciousness where somebody puts a name on us. There's a moment before it without that name. So we have to abandon these labels and names when we think about beginningless time. And then when we say, okay, I'm having a suffering, or I have some sort of color blindness. Oh, it's so rude. Somebody was saying on an application that you're saying that it's because you're bad that you're experiencing some sort of physical deficiency. No. You're missing the Buddhist point. Yours started when your parents labeled you. No, we're not talking about Jeff's did something. We're talking about in a previous incarnation, I could have been Bob, Bill, Jennifer, Claudia, Gizmo, right? I could have been named so many different things and been in so many embodiments. In a dog, as a cat, as an earthworm, that I felt I had as much meanness as I do right now. But it's not Jeff. Jeff's merely a label that was given to me. And you know what? Jeff will be a person who's alive, and then there's going to be a death certificate, and it's going to be deceased. Jeff Allen died on such and such a date, and then they'll burn my body, or depending on where, maybe give it to vultures if we're in a culture or place where that can happen. I'd rather have a sky burial if I could, just so I could feed sentient beings with my body. But if we're here in the West and we had to burn me up, right? So then I'll have a piece of paper that was this person that's talking to you right now, that's so important in my mind, that I say like, oh, you're hurting my feelings when you talk to me about the truth. Why are you hurting Jeff's feelings? Well, Jeff, throw away that idea. That thing you cling to that you feel is so real is part of your whole problem, Jeff. And then when, in 50 years, 60 max, unless there's some major development in science, Jeff will merely meet this thing on a piece of paper in a memory that says death certificate on the day of this Jeff's dead. And then my consciousness, the I that clings to the consciousness that has this self-grasping I that moves on. There's an I moving on, but it's not Jeff. It's whoever I think I am next. Whoever my karma propels me into thinking I am next. And I don't have any control over it. And that's the problem with cyclic existence. That's the problem Buddha identified. This pervasive compounded suffering that I'm going to keep thinking I'm Jeff and I'm Bob and I'm Earthworm Timmy. And I'm going to believe it at that moment and think that's my only existence. And I'm going to pay so much attention to that being the only thing there is. And it's going to be so dissatisfying and painful. And that attention will be paid only to that dissatisfaction and pain. And I'll be so attached to finding something that will get me out of it that isn't really a cure and doesn't really work. So I'll have to experience it over and over and over again. And that's the real issue with this being forced into problem that we talk about when we say pervasive compounded suffering. That's the karma sitch. And the Buddha is in some ways forced into having bliss, infinite happiness, omniscience, and perfect wisdom, etc. The Buddha couldn't have anything else because there is no existence of ignorance. It doesn't exist. It's a non-affirming negative, just like emptiness. There's not there. The freedom from suffering isn't this state of being free. I'm free here. It just means suffering doesn't exist anymore. There's only this. There isn't that anymore. There's no frame of reference. That's gone. That's a state that when cessation occurs, that's why we don't say cessation is caused. Because cessation is a mere absence of something that was before. That imputation is just a permanent imputation. It's a concept of something that's not there. A concept like there is the emptiness there is the lack of an elephant being on Jeff's head. Right now there is that. It's true. That's a truth. You can't deny that concept in your mind is true, that there's not an elephant sitting on Jeff's head. So that's just a concept, right? Just a permanent concept that doesn't have any way to move or change or create. It's just a concept. So that concept of cessation is just mere absence of suffering. So it's no longer there. So it's not actively making something occur. It's just doesn't have it any longer. This continuum no longer has a cause for it. Why? We're talking about karma. Because you get rid of this grasping at I and phenomena as being truly established. The grasping at the I and phenomena as being truly established, if not gotten rid of, causes me to become really addicted to Jeff. And then think funny. Oh, I'm so into me. I cherish me so much. And then I become attached. And then I become hateful. And I run towards everything I want. And I run away from everything I don't want. And then when I can't run away fast enough, it's so horrible in my mind. And when I can't get to what I want fast enough, it's so horrible in my mind. And therein lies the dissatisfaction and the misdiscrimination that we do over and over and over again. Because we don't mature our mind in a systematic way. So we have to start to have a more broad perception of what's going on. We have to see that when this attachment and hatred and all this arises, then we're going to act out. We're going to create karma. We're going to create action. We're going to create action through our body, speech, and mind. We're going to create the 3 actions of our body of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. We're going to harm beings in among 10 different ways. We're going to harm them through killing them, lying to them, or engaging in some sort of sexual misconduct that harms them. We're going to harm them through our speech. Through our body. We're going to harm them through killing. Let me rephrase that. I got ahead of myself. Through our body, we're going to harm sentient beings by killing them and by stealing from them and by committing sexual misconduct, the 3 non-virtues of our body. And as a result of this attachment and hatred, we'll engage in the 4 non-virtues of our speech. We'll lie to beings. We'll try to divide beings by talking to one person and making another person incompatible with them. We'll use harsh words. We'll say mean things to beings because of this attachment and hatred. We'll gossip. We'll talk about nonsensical things that will harm both of us. And then our minds will covet, have harmful intent, and have ignorance that then makes us do all of this stuff unethically to others, makes us harm them with our body and our speech. And then when we engage in non-virtue, when we engage in unethical behavior, that is like throwing, as Dharma says in The Wheel of Sharp Weapons, it's like throwing a boomerang with spikes on it, sharp, sharp teeth on it, out into the universe. Engaging in non-virtue, the 3 non-virtues of our body, of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, the 4 non-virtues of our speech, of lying, divisive speech, harsh words, and gossip, and the 3 non-virtues of our mind, of covetousness, harmful intent, and wrong views. And in dependence upon this intention, I act, and then I throw a boomerang that eventually comes back around and cuts me so deeply. I have to experience the suffering of that which I've planted in my consciousness. From my ignorance, as the 12 links of dependent origination, from ignorance, then I have this karma that I plant seeds and I plant this karmic seed in a consciousness. And it's like a throwing star, a shuriken that's a boomerang that I throw out into the universe. And then at some point in time, I'm abiding in existence, and then, I'm stricken with a terminal illness. It's the wheel of sharp weapons coming around because I previously cherished myself and harmed others. So this is how we look at karma. This is how we look at action. And then how does it come around to bite us? We have a fruition. We have a result of some sort of actual pain. The pain that we have to experience as we're dying. Think about that pain. Think about the pains we have to experience: birth, aging, sickness, death. Think about that pain. We have these fruitions because it's the wheel of sharp weapons that's come back around to us. Our karma that's come back around to us. Think about that. We have to experience it because we've done these things. And we do this over and over and over again. And then we experience them in so many ways. Our environment isn't the environment we want. We wonder why it isn't look as, why is the environment not as good as someone else's environment? Why is our house smaller than someone else's house? Why does somebody have so many enjoyments and I have so few enjoyments? It's the wheel of sharp weapons coming around because I wasn't generous before, because I was miserly, because I engaged in some kind of harm, and they didn't. They were a little nicer. Everything that I experience, I begin to see as a result of my karma. I have a throwing karma that makes my kind of general state as a human being and where, on earth. And then I have a completing karma that's from all these different kind of facets of things that I've done before that complete all the details around me. And then I believe it's all just me, mine, and I think that me and other, and I separate everything out like that, and then I decide what I find attractive, and I run towards that, and I decide what I find to not be attractive, and I run away from that. And then I act in certain ways to get at or get out of all of those things just mentioned. And then I engage in non-virtue, and then I throw out a star that's a boomerang that comes back around to cut me. Same thing's true, though, when I engage in virtuous actions. When I engage in virtuous actions, I'm doing the same thing. I'm throwing like a boomerang out there, but it comes back to me with something wonderful. And the thing is the non-virtue I throw out there, as it's spinning, like it's gaining more and more force, it magnifies. So a little non-virtue turns into a huge pain. And a little virtue comes back around and turns into a huge experience of happiness. So don't think that little non-virtues don't matter and little virtues don't matter, because they magnify. And even if we don't look at it in terms of magnification, if we look at it in terms of habituation, if you put a drop of water into a bucket over and over and over again, it eventually fills. If you put drops of poisonous water, you have poisonous water. If you have drops of pure water, then you have pure water. You have it full buckets. So don't think that virtue and non-virtue doesn't accumulate, doesn't magnify. It's so important for us to think about that and to understand. And then we'll have, our environment will look a certain way, we'll be a certain way, experiencing things a certain way, and then we'll behave a certain way because we have behavioral concordant karma. We're going to go through all of this. Just giving you some ideas today. We have this, some people have more of an affinity for acting out in this way or that way. Some people have more of an affinity for love and compassion. You see this. Kids that are more gentle than others. I was one of the kids that went and killed the frogs and killed the snakes. And then there were other kids, why are you doing that? And then I eventually, had a different kind of mentality. But I was kind of a little boy that was a disaster. And then something very strange happened, and I became more and more compassionate towards animals as I became older. And I don't mean older like 20s. I mean like I went from like maybe 7, 8 years old and being into doing boy stuff like that. And then I started to really have this weird compassion that came out of nowhere for animals, and used to cry at the dinner table because I had to eat animals. And I had done no Dharma practice. There was no intervention or something like, PETA came into my life, or it's just something karmically changed in my mind. And I started to see animals as loving. Maybe I had loved my dog. Maybe I had enough dog love. I don't know what it was, but something happened in my mind. It's very interesting how karma is, how we can be thinking in one way and think we're so sure we're thinking in one way, but our mind has so much kind of stuff running around in it, and predispositions from previous lives, and imprints that, and imprints from this life that kind of make us superimpose ideas onto everything. So it's interesting to see how from one moment to the next, even in this life, you can think that you've got a handle on certain emotions, certain negativities. I think I've almost gotten rid of anger. I'm not really an angry person anymore. And then you find out you are. You still haven't gotten rid of the grasping at eyes. So it'll come back up sooner or later. Even if you've suppressed it for a few lifetimes, which you can do. If you haven't applied the final antidote, which is the antidote of wisdom that recognizes the nature of reality to all of your afflictions, if that's not there, they'll all come back. They'll come back. It's just suppression. Realizing an impermanence and the impermanence of the I, and not finding the I because of its impermanence is only going to suppress the attachment to the I, because the grasping at the I isn't interfered with at that point. And if the grasping at the I isn't interfered with, isn't beaten down to nothing, to be a non-existent, then that grasping at the I will cause that attachment to show back up, even if it's been suppressed for lifetimes. So careful with not applying final antidotes. And you hear this a lot in the teachings. Geshe Dorje Damdu is talking about a lot, because there's a real trend in the West to have these teachings where you just watch your mind, nothing else. You're just watching your mind, you're becoming aware of your mind, and there's no further path than that. So what you do is you get very, very, very calmed down, but calmed down doesn't get rid of ignorance. If you could get a child to calm down, that wouldn't make them remove the ignorance of the ABCs. They'd have to learn that. But if they were calmed down, they could learn it a lot better, couldn't they? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get our minds calmed down and wise enough so we stop behaving like idiots, so we stop having the results of idiot behavior. But unfortunately, just suppressing idiot behavior, we all know doesn't work, because as bad as you don't want to do something, as bad as you don't want that chocolate cake, I'm not going to eat it, you probably will again, or you'll do something else like eating the chocolate cake to fill that void, and then you'll be like, well, I'm not going to do this other thing that I'm doing now to stop eating the chocolate cake. So you suppress that, and you never get rid of what makes you grasp at either one of those things in the first place. So we have to make sure that we're really, really getting at pure antidote. And we need all of these tools that you hear about. I'm not putting tools down, but we have to know they are just tools. Tools to get our mind calm enough to be able to watch it so that we can see our mind's emptiness. Very complicated topic. We have to somehow unite the objective and subjective clear light. The subjective awareness, that subjective mind at its most subtle level, apprehending the object of observation of emptiness and uniting it in some way. We have to get to that point. And that's the point of our meditation. And without the analysis and the conceptuality that gets us right to the edge of that cliff of direct perception of emptiness, you'll think you saw emptiness probably, and you didn't, because there's a lot of concentration levels that are blissful, that are meaningful, that seem vacant. I mean, there's a place called vacuity, where it seems like there's nothing at all. There's just pure consciousness. And they're still grasping at I. And that place fooled many, many, many a meditator who didn't study well enough, who missed some sort of points. And when you study really, really well, you can start to see why it's obviously necessary, and that the Buddha didn't just sit and calm his mind down. He calmed his mind down and got rid of the origin of suffering with wisdom. And that wisdom wasn't just from, it popped out of nowhere. The Buddha had negated every philosophical system that was in place in India at the time, and it all left him wanting. And he discovered this middle way between all of these different systems to be able to assert what the ultimate truth was. So we can't, be blessed by the Buddha to understand that ultimate truth. We have to go through the same mental stages that the Buddha went through to become the Buddha. But we will. That's the incredible thing. Like, you don't have to have somebody, there was great lamas when they first came to the United States. There's something that said this, they didn't know what to do with us Westerners. They didn't know. We can't, they haven't studied all of these tenets. What do we tell them? What do you tell them to get them going? Skillful means. Tell them they're all inside, they're just good. And if that makes them happy, tell them they're all Buddhas. Now, we have to understand what that means. We all have Buddha nature. We all have this clear light mind. We all have within us this mind that will be the same nature of mind as the mind of the Buddha when we become Buddha. This mind that's dry, depending on which school. If you look at some of the Dzogchen, you would say that the mind of purity is always alongside every main mind that's going on. The anger has the purity within it at the same time. And then the other schools would say that that's a more subtle level, a deeper level you'd have to get to in meditation. It's not always with everything just at a gross level of waking state or dreaming state or deep sleep state. It's at a deeper state that you only can get through to in meditation, at death, and in various other very, very quick points in time where you could see this mind. And a great meditator, if it's a quick point in time where you can see this mind, you can see how you would need to know what the hell you were looking for. And you'd have to be slow, have your mind be able to concentrate enough to be able to see what that is, right? So you would have to have these kind of two things, because if it's moving so quickly and there's points in time and where we can, see this clear light, then we would have to be able to get our mind calm enough to be able to be there right when we need to grasp it, to be able to have that clear light, unify with the object of observation, emptiness. What the mind is meditating on is emptiness. The mind is clear light. The unity of the object and subject. Objective clear light, phenomenon's clear light is the lack of true establishment. The mind's clear light, the mind's objective clear light is the mind's lack of true establishment. And the mind's subjective clear light, the subtle clear light mind that doesn't grasp apprehending the objective emptiness of the mind. And this unity won't just come from hoping. I saw a question in the chat, so I like questions. I don't have questions turned, unfortunately, on TikTok and some of the other applications. I think I can see Facebook, but because I can't really respond. I don't want to look like I'm being rude. And a lot of times, a lot of the comments really aren't helpful for those who want to actually study Buddhism. And if I had time to debate and, I didn't have all these other people watching, we could go on for all day. And I would assure you I could answer any questions that you may or may not have. But for this is an actual Buddhist teaching, so I'm sorry I can't turn the comments back on the app. So there are people on Zoom also, and there is a question. I don't know what it is. If someone were to stumble into vacuity, could that experience panic that person into thinking that they had lost their self due to a lack of discernment? Yeah, You could sit there for a really long time. You could actually be deceived by the state of meditation. I have not had that state of acuity. I do not have shamatha. I'm working, every morning of my life on getting shamatha. I think that it's one of the most overlooked things. Sometimes, in the presentations that we've had, the focus has always been maybe a lot of the presentations we've had have been from individuals who don't have such crazy minds as Westerners and don't have these minds that are like, I'm not trying to make us special, but we have a lot of stimulation. If you look at the amount of stimulation, even in the monastery with all the iPhones and internet cafes and all this different stuff that they certainly wouldn't have had, there's so much more need for this calm abiding practice for practitioners like me. So I always heard in the teachings, if you have a bigger problem with conceptuality, meditate on the breath. Well, Alan Wallace said, yeah, for those people over there, most of us Westerners have the monkey mind. Venerable Thupten Chodron's one of her first book was Taming the Monkey Mind. We have this monkey mind that's like, going here, going there, I need this, I need that. I'm in a teaching, not paying attention because this is what I'm really doing, but this is my teaching and I'm spiritual. We're like out of control in our minds. And yes, we all have a biggest problem with conceptuality. We got a big problem with it, folks. We think ourselves into a mess day and night. So this calm, abiding meditation, this meditation on the breath, I cannot say it enough. Breathing in, fill your lungs, fill your diaphragm, focusing only on the breath, breathing in through your nose and exhaling and keeping track of that number. And I promise you, if you get up in the morning, and if your mind is normally busy guy, and you're usually really good at analytical meditation, you think, and then you go to sit down and it's like you start to do the breathing and it's like you get to 2 and you're already on, like, I don't know, music for some reason sometimes comes up for me, or like environment, things like that will come up for me when I'm like trying to focus on the breath. Suddenly I'll hear like, I don't know, some kind of like Jerry Garcia, I don't know, or some kind of music will happen. And that's just my familiarization with stimulation. We are not happy unless we are stimulated at all times. I heard this incredible thing. I'm going to share it with you in case I forget it. Alan Wallace said a study was done where participants were put in a room and they had an electrical shock they could have done, but they couldn't write, they couldn't do anything. There was no stimulation, there was no music, there was no movie, there was nothing they could do but sit in a chair in an empty room with their own mind. But they had one thing they could do: they would shock themselves. And like this incredible majority of people, men mainly, the study was strange. Women didn't do it as much. They were able to sit quieter better. So maybe I'm only speaking from my monkey man mind. But yeah, apparently the men would touch the thing, and some of them did it like 100 times in 20 minutes just because they needed some sort of stimulation because they couldn't handle it. So you see your mind trying to drag stimulation back into it. So yes, if you go in every morning and you do 21 breaths, start with, and do not, until you can get to 21 and not want to run for your life and not have been through a road race of your own conceptions, don't try to move the number up. It'll take, it's a minute and a half if you're doing it and not losing your number, but it could take 10, 50, it could take a long time to get to 21 breaths, and bringing it back to the object, bringing it back to the breath, remembering what breath you're on, remembering the number. And the other thing that's going to creep in, I promise, you'll start counting on the inhale. You'll start messing up your whole thing that you've told your mind to do. So get up in the morning or whenever you do your meditation and take some time, recognize we have this human basis and that we're going to die and that we have to do something to manifest our spiritual practice this day so that we can become Buddhas. And we have to have the analysis, and we have to have a calm mind, and we have to unite those two, and we have to have renunciation, and we have to have bodhicitta. So figure out a way to get that together. And the calmer the mind is, the better we can do all the rest of it. No questions asked. If our mind is calm, if our mind is focused, if our mind is efficient, then we can do all of those things. So I'm getting to your question. So we should do this meditation a lot. Now, if we have studied thoroughly and we know the signs, we know the stages of shamatha, the 9 levels, we can look into those later. We'll know what to look for in terms of excitement and dullness. We'll know what introspection, the spine, the mind is doing, and how mindfulness brings the object of observation back over and over and over again. And when we get to the point where we can hold whatever object we end up on, maybe we'll end up on just the breath. I don't know. I find that I feel for me that just a single solitary object like the Buddha or Tara or something is where I want to land, to be able to hold that image for up to 4 hours once I get shamatha, that is induced by this calm, induced by a mental and physical pliancy. So I want to be able to hold that object. And so, I think that the breathing is very, very awesome. But eventually I like to add the object and then take it to just forgetting the breath and have the object alone. But eventually we will realize these states. But we have to watch our mind. We have to tell our mind what to do. That's what Lama Tsongkhapa says we have to do in the beginning. He says that we have to tell our mind what to do for the first time. If we're going to tell it, we're only going to breathe in and then count on the exhale. Don't count on the inhale. If he says we're not going to breathe in real quick and breathe out real quick, see if you're doing that. Be aware that you're doing that and bring it back to the very natural breathing in and out. Because there is an emotion in the breath, the wind breathing in and out. It's you applying emotion, applying thinking to it, but there is no emotion. So as you get to higher and higher states, you could see a vacuity of self. And then when we look at Buddha's life story, we see his last 2 teachers had achieved states like this and thought they were liberated. So did they lose their self due to a lack of discernment? There's still a grasping at self happening there at a subtle level, yet there isn't enough wisdom there that can unite with that calm abiding to be able to see that subtle self that's being apprehended. So you can abide for, they say, like long, like they're talking like long times. If you're born in like a formless, say you get this concentration and you pass from this, say I got it, and pass from this physical form, and then you were like this concentration like carried into a formless rebirth, you could be in that for like eons, in this single pointed concentration of vacuity, or the peak of existence where Buddha's last teacher achieved. So yeah, you can fall into the wrong understanding, and that's why you can't just do calming meditation. Watch your mind, get very calm, be able to be single-pointed. If you don't have that wisdom, you can fall into this question, to vacuity, and think that there's not a self. There is a self. It's just not inherently existent. The self goes from life to life. If there's no self, what accumulates karma? There's no self, what's getting virtue causing happiness and non-virtue causing suffering? We have to see dependent origination self. We have to see a conventionally, subjectively existent self. Not an objectively existent self, but a subjectively existent self is here. There is this thing. There is a collection that my mind is putting together, a collection, an external collection of things my mind is putting together of some sort, and then subjectively labeling it as this or that, bringing it into being as this or that from my own side. So I have to realize if my mind is still doing that, and if I'm just concentrating, I'll just sit in a subtle state of grasping at true establishment, very subtly, very, very subtly, and not feeling pain, not feeling physical pain, maybe not even being attached for very, very long periods of time, not have, being able to, just sit in this concentration and not, have any of the attachment to body or, any of the, earth element or the fire or the wind or the water elements. None of this, kind of feelings that occur in relation to those things are happening. And I could just get into this pure space where the mind seems like the wind isn't even moving it. And there's subtly this activity going on that's grasping at I. So Yeah, it's a great question. My inclination that if we imagine it, it's possible, but Buddha is the source of our wisdom. Yeah, that's it. That's how we don't end up stuck there. We follow the integrated path. We follow paths from beings like Khyentse Geshe Wandak, Dalai Lama, Lama Tsongkhapa. We follow. First you do this, second you do that, third you do that, fourth you do that. Okay, so you say you've mastered, second you do that. Okay, is your mind imbued with that? If it's not imbued with that, you may know it, you may intellectually know it, you may have the wisdom arisen from hearing, you may have a correctly assuming consciousness, but we know what happens to that. It can fall to doubt and back into wrong view. You have to inferentially understand it and know it beyond a shadow of a doubt. So it's not just a suppression of a wrong idea, and it's an actual an eradication of that wrong idea. Cool talking stuff. Buddhism. I know that was a full 2 hours of Buddhism food for you all. So I appreciate anyone who could hang in there on any of the apps for any period of time. And I have to tell you, it was very hard for me to sit through teachings, for long teachings. Now I could literally, as long as I can move my legs, I could literally just sit here. If I had lunch and stuff, because I'd get hungry, I could just listen to this stuff all day because it truly is like nectar for my mind. When I hear it. But it wasn't always like that. And if you find yourself bored, if you find yourself fidgeting, if you find yourself, I guess, I hope this guy stops talking like that. I found myself like that many, many times, even in the Dalai Lama's teachings, where my mind wasn't slowed down enough to be able to really, really listen. And I promise you, it's a learned skill. Sit through these teachings, force yourself to do it. This is a way to help make your mind concentrate. It doesn't have to be in this special position listening to a tape about, listening to the winds and listening to you can literally hone it in by forcing yourself to hear this information and becoming more and more able to sit still and focus your mind on something that really matters. Because if you have your favorite tunes on, you could even play like air guitar for this long. I mean, seriously, really, like you could spin for a whole dead set, right? You can probably pay attention, in some cases to, something that will really make you happy, that will really give you fearlessness and complete bliss. So those other things will suppress fear for a moment or two, maybe give you some temporary happiness, make you feel good about yourself, make you feel like you maybe know something more than other people, but then it'll all come back and you'll realize it's just a bloody mess. And then really, really, even though you know a bunch of stuff, your heart's hardened by the Dharma, and it's not working because you haven't integrated the path. You haven't realized that all these teachings are not contradictory. They're all instructions to practice. You don't know what the Buddha meant. The Buddha meant abandon all non-virtue, engage in perfect virtue, and subdue your mind. And the Buddha was very specific how that would happen, and that was the teaching of the Buddha. So there's very specific ways that we go about doing this. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you do not have bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. And we make a mandala offering as a thanks for teaching to all the holy beings. And the teacher who gave this teaching, I'm not a holy being, but all of my teachers were so holy that I feel confident with holy information and giving you holy information and being the parakeet transmitter of holiness. So please make a mandala offering out of respect to that pure lineage in a mandala, pure land that all sentient beings abide in. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots fruits of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. So saying the way that all the holy beings dedicate their virtue, I want to do it in that way because I don't have the capacity to say beautiful things like Samantabhadra. I don't have the capacity to know the right things to say like all the Buddhas of the three times. So the way that they say it, may I dedicate all this virtue that I've amassed by listening to the Dharma and thinking about the Dharma to becoming a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Any virtue that's dedicated to Buddhahood will be a cause, will linger around until that Buddhahood is experienced. So may all of this virtue that we've accumulated by attending this teaching turn our minds into eventually the pure mind of a Buddha so that we can help all sentient beings. And in that pure land, surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful, Avalokiteshvara. Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. Gangri Rawe Gorwe Shinjan Dir Bendan Dewa Malu Jongwe Ne Chen Zi Wan Tenzin Gyatso Yi Jabezi de Badu Denyo. I pray that in all of our lives, may we never be separated from Kensur Geshe Wandak in whatever form he or she chooses to show us, whether we meet in the emanation body or the supreme body when we become Arya Bodhisattvas, and we can see an actual enjoyment body. May we in all our lives never be separated from Kensur Geshe Wandak, and then eventually become Buddhas and help Kensur Geshe Wandak and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all these holy beings lead all sentient beings to a state of Buddhahood. So everybody knows the beautiful stupa isn't filled and finished, but we have it now in India, and I can send you pictures of it for Kensur Geshe Wandak. And yes, such a large amount of effort has gone on to make that possible. So I just want to say I rejoice in all of the work that all of the monks and the nuns and everybody and all of you have done to accumulate the merit, to have met with Kensur Geshe Wandak, and now to offer him a beautiful, beautiful stupa where his ashes and relics will be in. So everyone rejoice in the fact that we met Kensur Geshe Wandak. I know it's sad that he passed from this world and we don't have his physical embodiment with us any longer, but I feel him so closely when I speak the Dharma, because the only time that I ever talked like this, the only time that I ever presented this information was when I had a holy being named Kensur Geshe Wandak sitting next to me. And I only said what I could know I knew he was saying, and I said it out loud. So now I'm saying these things to you. And I hope that you feel Kensur Geshe Wandak every time that I open my mouth and I talk about the Four Noble Truths, and I talk about bodhicitta, and I talk about emptiness, and I talk about Tantrayana. I hope that you feel Kensur Geshe Wandak right there in your heart, right there at your crown, right there in the front generation, there to take care of you and protect you in all of your lives. I hope that you hear his words coming out of my mouth, because none of these are made up from me. And there is nothing that I will have to say that Kensur Geshe Wandak isn't smiling about hearing right now. So please, please, please continue to be the reason that the Dharma stays in the world, and be practitioners of that Dharma. Thank you, everyone. See you all soon. Have a wonderful week, and use the Dharma to change your mind into a Buddha's mind.